I'm Colin, and welcome back to yet again another bonus episode of Old's Oscar Countdown. That's a total of 4 videos in a week, one of the busiest weeks in Old Oscar Countdown history, and frankly one of the busiest weeks in Oscar prognostication. It's been a really exciting week. And for something new this year, I decided to predict the Critics' Choice Awards. They've been sort of gaining in steam in recent years in popularity, but also in their accuracy when it comes to predictions. Usually I like to only cover award shows like the Golden Globes, which have a big impact on the Oscar race, and then of course the actual Guild Awards like Producers Guild and DGA. But I decided to have a little fun this year. The Critics' Choice Awards has been very accurate in past just because they nominate many of the films that are also nominated at the Oscars, and they are a large voting group, so it can tell us how sort of large groups of film-loving fans ultimately vote. They are different than the Academy, but it's interesting and still fun to see early on in the season an award show like this with many of the movies we ultimately see at the Oscars. So this year I decided to give some predictions for them. So unlike some of my expertise that I've developed over 6-7 years with my Oscar predictions or my Golden Globe predictions, I can't guarantee that these predictions are even super terrific, but I tried to do my research, I tried to do my homework, looking at statistics, looking at past years of Critics' Choice. Of course, I still followed Critics' Choice in past years, never super closely as I did, say, the Oscars or Golden Globes, but this year I wanted to give my hand at a shot to see what I think is going to win, with some surprises in some of the below-the-line categories, but then some traditional chalk picks as well. And there's not going to be a lot of analysis in these predictions, just me sort of listing them off, giving a couple points as to why I picked this over, say, another movie, and give some of my analysis and reasoning behind it. So starting off with Best Picture, ultimately I went with Everything Everywhere All at Once. It has the combination of having the most amount of nominations with 14, with both above the line and the below the line support. So it's a really well nominated movie. Does that mean it's going to be well liked? I think it will be. It's a critic's darling. It has some of the emotional elements and it's stuck around since April, really, when it was released, so it has that long-staying power. It has that really sort of strong emotional core to it, but there's also sort of creative, unique, and fun, so it'll appeal to the critics who have seen so many movies. So it's a little bit of something that they like, but done in a different way. So I think Everything Everywhere All at Once will have its fans and have that overall broad support to win for picture. Then for director, I went with Steven Spielberg for The Fabelmans. I think some people are overreacting to The Fabelmans, sort of doing poorly in some of the other guilds, and then think, oh, Spielberg's not going to win here. You have to consider that, yes, Everything Everywhere All at Once had a total 14 nominations, but The Fabelmans had 11 nominations. This was a very well-liked movie within this group. So am I predicting that Fabelmans is going to get all these nominations and no wins? You know, that would be unlikely. I think Steven Spielberg gets the win here because in this group it was well-liked, and I don't really see a clear number 2. Is it Martin McDonagh? Is it the Daniels? Here with Spielberg, you have a super well-liked director already, making a very personal movie to him, so there's an element that he deserves the award even more so than the film because it's an autobiographical element to him, plus the fact that I thought his Golden Globe speech was really terrific and sort of vaulted him maybe in the eyes of some unwary Critics' Choice voters to sort of push him over the edge for the win. So I still think Spielberg, the frontrunner to win the Oscar, will win here. Best Actress, I'm going with Cate Blanchett from Tar, and I can totally see a situation where Cate Blanchett and Michelle Yeoh tie for this award in the same way Glenn Close and Lady Gaga tied for A Star is Born and The Wife back in 2018. Because these two are super competitive, and Michelle is really well liked in a movie that's really well liked, but ultimately I went with Cate Blanchett for Tar because when I was predicting a lot of these certain categories, the sort of pull for me was either I'm going to go with a movie that I think is going to win the Oscar, or a performance that I think is going to win the Oscar, or a performance that I think the critics will particularly like. So I had a little bit of give and take in this category. I ultimately went with the one that I think the Oscars will like. Let's not forget, Tar was a super well nominated movie here, getting in for things like editing and director and screenplay. So the movie is still well liked, and Cate Blanchett is still a super well liked actress. I think her performance is almost undeniable in this movie. I think they go with sort of the Oscar favorite. I think they go with Cate Blanchett. Then for Best Lead Actor, I went with Colin Farrell for The Banshees of Inisherin. So in the last category, I went with the frontrunner for the Oscar, but this one, I think the critics go their own way. I think they go with Colin Farrell for The Banshees of Inisherin because this movie was well nominated versus something like Brendan Fraser for The Whale. That movie sort of underperformed at the Critics' Choice Awards here in terms of nominations, not getting for Hong Chow, for example, not getting it for picture. So there's more of a strong appreciation of The Banshees. Plus, if you think of Colin Farrell, his year as a total, he was really great in After Yang, which critics really liked. He was great in The Batman, which was appreciated. He was great in 13 Lives. He had such a great overall year. Plus, his performance here, I think that will be a factor in critics' minds. Plus, I think the sort of other contender being Brendan Fraser his movie, The Whale, disappointed within critics here. So I think ultimately in that sort of close race, I'll go with Colin Farrell just because I think they like his overall movie more. Best Supporting Actress, I went with Angela Bassett for Black Panther Wakanda Forever. And this was a super confusing category, with many people thinking maybe Jessie Buckley could win early on in the season, and now she may not even get nominated. So for me, I went with Angela Bassett because I thought when she won at the Globes, that gave a lot of people sort of the sign and the sort of confidence to go, you know what, I guess Angela Bassett did give a great performance, we're going to give it to her. In a year where there's such lack of clarity in terms of who the even frontrunner is in this category, when you see an award show like the Globes award somebody and say, actually, this is the frontrunner, that can have significant effect. In the same way when the Globes did that back in 2017, when they were like Allison Janney for I, Tonya, she's the big frontrunner, and then all of a sudden every award show sort of followed after that. I think a similar thing's going to happen, and Angela Bassett will get the win here, sort of surprising a lot of people. Best Supporting Actor, I went with Cate Blanchett from Everything Everywhere All at Once. Because of his Globe speech, I think he just solidified his place as the frontrunner with that great speech, but also even before then I probably would have picked him because Brendan Gleeson and Barry Keoghan for the Banshees of Inisherin were nominated, so I think there's going to be a little bit of a vote splitting and support for that movie, leading Cate Blanchett to clearly get the frontrunner of the win. Original Screenplay, I actually went with Everything Everywhere All at Once, because if I looked at sort of the past years, and I talked about this on my Globes predictions video, but when I look at the screenplay category, most years it's either a sort of dialogue heavy kind of a movie versus a unique, creative, interesting structure, interesting idea screenplay. So it's Get Out versus Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. It's Promising Young Woman versus The Trial of Chicago 7. It's Belfast versus Licorice Pizza. Most of the years, you know, they have that sort of one versus the other kind of a factor. It's The Favorite versus Green Book. And oftentimes, these sort of more unique, different, odder, stranger kind of a movie is more appreciated by Critics' Choice. So Get Out beat Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. Even though Three Billboards did very well at Critics' Choice, Get Out still won there. And the same way Promising Young Woman did better than The Trial of Chicago 7, because it's a little bit more of a stranger, unique kind of approach to storytelling. I think the critics appreciated that more. So this year I look at the same thing. I go Everything Everywhere All at Once, unique, creative, how do they write that, versus The Banshees of Inisherin, which is dialogue focused and interesting. Some people think that the Banshees will get sort of a consolation prize in this category. I think the consolation prize is actually going to come later. I think Everything Everywhere All at Once wins the screenplay here, wins the supporting actor, and then wins picture. I think that's their path here at Critics' Choice. Plus, in years past, they've also linked the screenplay winner to the eventual Best Picture winner. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood won for Best Picture. It also won for Best Original Screenplay. Spotlight, the same thing happened to it. La La Land, the same thing happened. So the critics do like to link screenplay and picture more often than not. Because I'm going for Everything Everywhere All at Once for picture, it made sense to put it in for screenplay. Adapted screenplay, I went with Women Talking. This is still a movie that got nominated for Best Director and Best Ensemble and Best Picture for this award show, so there's still broad support, at least in this critics groups, of the film, of people that have seen it. So I think they're going to want to throw it a bone in one of these categories. And adapted screenplay, there's not a lot of competition. You could go with something like Glass Onion or The Whale, but Glass Onion didn't even get nominated for Best Director. There's clearly a little bit more support for Women Talking as a movie, so I went with that for Best Adapted Screenplay. Best Ensemble, I'm going to go with The Banshees of Inisherin. I was very surprised to see it on 4th place at Gold Derby in terms of other voters who they think is going to win. Because to me, it makes a lot of sense. If you're going to go for Everything Everywhere All at Once for picture, as am I, then I think the sort of consolation prize would be something like Best Ensemble. In the same way Belfast last year won for Best Ensemble, but then the big prize with The Power of the Dog. It sort of had this sort of consolation number 2. So for me, in the same way also Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri won for Ensemble, and then The Shape of Water won for picture. So to me, Banshees of Inisherin makes total sense here, especially because they, like Everything Everywhere All at Once, nominated 4 performances for that movie. They nominated Barry and Brendan and Carrie and Colin. They really liked the overall ensemble, and if they don't feel like it has enough sort of overall support, this is an easy way to give them sort of a quote-unquote big award and still sort of appreciate a movie like Everything Everywhere All at Once with the picture slot. Best Young Actor or Actress, I went with Gabrielle LaBelle from The Fabelmans. I have a little bit of concern that something like a Frankie Corio will win for Aftersun because they usually like these younger performances, but The Fabelmans still got 11 nominations. There's still support for that film, and while I think it's going to win Best Director, it should have won at least one other award if it's this well-liked movie. This is an easy one to win. You know, they usually like to go with a sort of a younger actor, like a Jude Hill from Belfast, but I went with Gabriel LaBelle this year just because he reminds me a little bit of someone like a Lucas Hedges from Manchester by the Sea. An interesting kind of a teen performance that is still young enough that is able to qualify in this category. And Gabriel LaBelle is a real central emotional part of that film. So they clearly like the Fabelmans. I think they'll like it enough to give it the award here, but watch for Frankie Corio for After Sun, because I know that movie has its fans. Best comedy film, I went with Everything Everywhere All at Once, self-explanatory. I think it's going to win for Best Picture, so it should win for Best Comedy Film. Animated feature, Pinocchio, frontrunner to win at the Oscars, and the only animated feature to have multiple other nominations, getting nominated in score and song, so clearly a broader sign of support for that movie. Best foreign film, RRR, makes sense to me because it got nominated for picture and director, the only international film of the bunch that did that and managed to qualify for that, so there's clearly support for it there. Cinematography, I went with basic here. I went with Top Gun Maverick. I thought maybe something like an Avatar or whatnot, because I'm a little bit concerned that Top Gun Maverick didn't even get in for Best Director at Critics' Choice nominations. That was a little bit concerning to me, even though there was 10 nominations. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I think most people saw Avatar and Top Gun Maverick in theaters, which of course is that big screen experience, so the cinematography is a little bit more noticeable. The difference why I went with Top Gun over Avatar, it's all CG. Do people really know where the camera is or the role of the cinematographer? Not necessarily. Or at least with Top Gun Maverick, you can say, wow, they put the cameras on the planes and they did everything practically, and it's a beautiful shot anyways in this kind of timeless look with no cell phones and whatnot, harkening back to the original. I think they're going to want to give Top Gun Maverick something, and this is an easy, clear technical award that it could win. Costume design, I went with Black Panther Wakanda Forever. I think there's been more and more support, as we've been seeing from the guilds for this movie, that people do appreciate this movie. The first movie, Black Panther, won for costume design here at Critics' Choice, and when that happened, I think Ruth Carter became a little bit more notable as a costume designer, as sort of a notable person, and a costume designer like a Mary Joffres or Colin Atwood. She became sort of in that status of notable costume designers. So if you're giving an appreciation to Black Panther and their ability to expand from Wakanda but also into the Talokan, I think this is an easy sort of a win here for the appreciation of the costumes. And you know, in these technical categories, it's not always the quality of the film. It would be foolish to say, hey, Black Panther Wakanda Forever didn't get in for Best Picture, therefore it should get, it shouldn't win here. That would be foolish to say, just because if you look at past years of costume design winners, they haven't gone with movies that were well liked. I mean, look at a movie like last year, Cruella. That movie wasn't super well liked, but the costumes were super well appreciated, so they still gave it the win. I think a similar thing's going to happen here with Black Panther Wakanda Forever. Then for editing, I went with Everything Everywhere All at Once, which is a bit of an out there prediction because I think a lot of people are going with Top Gun Maverick because it's an action movie. But I went with Everything Everywhere All at Once here because the editing is super fast paced. It has all the different multiverses. They're sort of cramming in this huge, super ambitious story and able to cram it down into less than 3 hours, 2.5 hours thereabouts of the story. And if you look at the past winners of particularly the editing category, they're very different than the Oscars. You know, we've seen winners like 1917 and First Man and West Side Story, movies that don't end up winning at the Oscars, but they're definitely well appreciated here at Critics' Choice. So they do like to go a little bit strange with the editing, and Everything Everywhere All at Once had 14 nominations, and that wasn't because it got all these above-the-line nominations. It got the above-the-line nominations, but it also got technical nominations. It got makeup and hair, it got costume design, it got editing, it got visual effects. So there's clearly support for the technical appreciation and technical side of that film. I think that support is going to show up in a win in one of these categories. I think the one that makes the most sense, go to a category like editing because of that fast-paced, multiversal, back-and-forth editing of the film and the storytelling. I think that will be appreciated. Then hair and makeup, I went with The Whale because when we look at past winners, Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, Eyes of Tammy Faye, Bombshell, Jackie, the winners are almost always associated with a performance, either a performance win or a performance nomination. So what makes sense here? Well, Brendan Fraser, of course, has the makeup, but Austin Butler also has the makeup. So you could go with Elvis here, totally. But for me, when I think of makeup and I think of those two movies, Austin Butler's not really wearing a lot of makeup in Elvis, not until the end of the movie. Whereas you think of The Whale, Brendan Fraser has that sort of prosthetic fat suit and additions to his face throughout the entire movie. He's going through a super physical makeup prosthetic-driven transformation in that movie throughout the entire movie, whereas Elvis is just at the very end. So I think The Whale, even though it didn't do so well here, it's actually going to get a makeup award here because of the prosthetics used for the actors, in the same way Ma Rainey's Black Bottom won, or Eyes of Tammy Faye last year, or Bombshell. the Critics' Choice, like the Oscars, really do like the prosthetics. I think the whale will win here for hair and makeup. Then Best Score, I went with Babylon. Justin Hurwitz won for La La Land, but he also won for First Man, his last score that he did with Damien Chazelle. This is another one, and let's not forget, Babylon actually had the third most amount of nominations with 10 nominations at the Critics' Choice Awards. So there's an appreciation for this film. So that appreciation should end up somewhere. This is a very musical score in many ways, like La La Land or First Man. The music is a heavy part of the film, so I think Babylon will be appreciated, particularly the score. Best Song, I went with Not To Not To from RRR because it's one of the few nominees where the song is actually in the movie versus something like a end credits situation of Hold My Hand or Lift Me Up. And RRR was super well liked within this group. It got nominated for Best Director. It got nominated for Picture. It was really well liked, so I think this makes clear sense to me. I'm very surprised that not a lot of people had this. I think RRR will definitely win for Song, particularly amongst the critics. Then for production design, this was a super tough category for me. I think really any of the 5 categories and potential nominees could win. But for me, I went with Elvis. The people behind the production design, Catherine Martin and Beverly Dunn, won for production design for The Great Gatsby back in 2013, even though that movie wasn't super well nominated. Now you have a movie like Elvis, which gets in for Best Director, which gets in for Best Picture, which gets in, of course, for Best Actor, and a lot of technical awards. Editing and costume design. There's an appreciation of the technical craft of Elvis, and then of course Above the Line too, because they nominated Best Director. So the critics still do like Elvis, and I think the production design is the sort of period piece element, the sort of grandiose element of it. And if you already have Babylon winning score, and you have Avatar winning visual effects, and maybe even cinematography, where do you want to show your support for Elvis? I think production design makes the most sense here because of that lavish period piece and different changing of the eras. It's a sort of a big surprise of the night. It's, you know, not in a lot of people's top rankings, but for me, I feel like Elvis makes sense here. And then my final prediction, visual effects going to Avatar: The Way of Water. Locked win of the night, the sort of VFX immersive experience that you see in the theaters. Frankly, I'd be shocked if it didn't win. Avatar should almost definitely win for visual effects. But that's it. That's my sort of first time predicting the Critics' Choice Awards. Come Monday, I'll be giving my reactions to those awards, and then we're going to go back into the award show. Eventually, with the Oscar nominations coming out, I'm going to give my live reactions to that. Then after that, I'm going to be doing the Connors, which is my award show. It'll be the 7th annual Connors, where I give out my personal favorite movies of the year, my favorite performances, my favorite cinematography, animated features, all that kind of stuff. So stay tuned for that, the 7th annual Connors. That's coming up in a couple weeks, and then of course the Oscar nominations. So so you don't miss out on all this great content, please subscribe to the channel and let me know your Critics' Choice predictions. I'm a little bit of a noob to this, so let me know if I was a little bit wrong or made some glaring omissions. I guess we'll ultimately see come Sunday, but that's about it. Until next time, stay tuned.